Hello and welcome back to Jellybean and Koala. In this video we're going to be doing a baking video on cinnamon rolls. So this is going to be the first in a series of videos that we're going to do, and it's going to be called Fat Fridays. Let's get started. Okay, so these are the ingredients we're going to be using today to make the dough for the cinnamon rolls. So we're going to be using 750 grams of plain flour, and then there's a half teaspoon of salt in there. There's going to be 100 grams of sugar. I like to keep about 10 grams or so. We've been interrupted by a run-on celebrity. Good girl, what the hell are you? Good girl. This is a professional setup we're running here. So I like to keep 10 grams of sugar over for when I melt the butter and milk together, because into that mix then I add the yeast, and the yeast needs something to feed off. So
what's the yeast that you use called?
That's a good question. So this is just yeast we got in Aldi, and it's 2 7-gram packets. So the yeast, I like to give it a bit of sugar just to feed off, so it kind of activates a little quicker in the mixture. So first up we're going to be melting the butter in a small pot, and then we're going to stir in the milk and bring that up to a lukewarm temperature before we add the yeast. Okay, so we're going to be adding the butter into the pan, and then we'll just melt this slowly. So as the butter's starting to melt now, we'll just wait till it's fully melted, and then we're going to turn down the heat a little bit, and that's when we add our milk. And then we want to bring it so that it's a nice lukewarm temperature, so that you can just touch it with your finger. Okay, so here we have the mixture now. It's a nice lukewarm temperature. So what we're going to do is add that 10 grams we had left over from the sugar just into this mixture. It just basically gives something for the yeast to feed on. So just two teaspoons, they're about 5 grams each. And just mix that in now until it's dissolved fully. Get rid of this. And now we're going to add in our yeast. So these are 2 7-gram sachets. Son of a bitch, on camera.
Now we're back.
So we just got a whisk, and we're just going to incorporate that yeast into the mixture. We don't need to whisk it too much, it's just to combine it a bit and kind of make sure there's no clumps in it. And now that we've done that, we're going to leave it for about 5 or 10 minutes just for the yeast to activate, so it'll start to kind of foam up and bubble. You can see the yeast has started to activate, and it's kind of starting to foam up. I think the adding a little bit of sugar kind of helps to kind of speed this process up a little bit. So if you want to come over here, audience, and see what we're doing. So I've just added the sugar mix to the flour and salt. So we're just going to give this a mix around. So you always want to make sure that when you have salt in a mixture, make sure it's mixed in thoroughly before you add any yeast. Okay, so we just want to make sure this is mixed well. Okay, so then we're just going to create a little well in the center, and we're going to pour our butter and milk mixture with the yeast in. Now, so this is where you want to mix and create your dough. So you want to mix this until it kind of becomes more solid, so you're going to be able to kind of take it out and then start kneading it. And don't be afraid if the dough seems quite wet. that's normal, and like as you can start kneading it and see how it goes, but kind of try and avoid adding too much extra flour to the mixture, because it'll dry out, and then when you go to try and cook the cinnamon rolls, they're not going to be as light and fluffy as they should be. Our production studio is taking a bit of a beating in the background.
Falling apart.
This is what your dough should start to look like before you tip it out and start kneading it. So it's all come together, and it's quite kind of springy and firm. Okay, so this is ready to start kneading. So basically what you want to do is a bit of flour. You want to flour your surface just to avoid the dough sticking. Now, so tip this out. Now, sometimes it's good as well just to flour your hands a bit, just to avoid the dough sticking at the start, because that could be disastrous, as it was in our last attempt. Okay, so you just want to knead this for 5 or so minutes. You want to kind of build up the glutens, create a nice springy, firm, strong dough. Then after that, we're going to leave it to rise for about 30 to 45 minutes, just until it's probably about double the size. So, no rocket science here. We're just stretching out the dough
With your the heel of the hands, is it?
Yeah, so you can stretch it out and bring it back over. Stretch it out. There's no real science to this, so don't get too bogged down in any sort of technique here. Just want to make sure it doesn't get too wet. Because what can happen is, because it's not like a bread or like a sourdough mixture, you can add a bit of flour. Like, you obviously don't want it to get you don't want it to get too wet and then start sticking to your hands when you're trying to knead it. Like, this will be workout of the day.
Go.
Okay, so now that our dough's come together and it's kind of nice smooth texture, we're going to want to just get it up into a little ball. So basically what we're doing here is using the friction of the table to kind of bring it into a nice little tight ball, tucking in under as you go, like you'd do if you were trying to make any bread dough or anything like that. And then that kind of ties in the end a bit. So there you go, there's our ball. We're going to put it into a floured bowl, and we're going to cover with a bit of cling film. And nicely done.
Better than me.
So a bit of cling film. Cover it with a tea towel.
Christmas style.
Christmas style tea towel. And then we're just going to leave it here on the table to about double in size, and then we'll come back and we will see you after this. Okay, so we're back now, and our dough has risen nicely. So it's risen nicely, and we're just going to tip it out onto a floured surface now. This is just so it doesn't stick when we're rolling it out. Okay, so we've also stuck on our oven to 220 degrees Celsius, and then we're going to turn that down to 190 degrees before we put them in. Okay, so what you want to do now is you're going to be rolling a rectangle shape or as close as you can get, and if you can't get a perfect rectangle you can just cut off the edges to make it a rectangle. Then we're going to be putting on our filling. Okay, so this is our filling we're going to be using today. It is, I like to double the mixture because I feel like it fills the cinnamon rolls better, so it's going to be 220 grams of softened butter and 180 grams of brown sugar. You can use light or dark brown sugar, doesn't really matter. And then there's going to be about a tablespoon, heaped tablespoon of cinnamon powder. And then when that's all mixed together, I like to add a tiny bit of vanilla essence as well. So we're just going to mix this up. Okay, so we're just going to roll this out now. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a perfect rectangle. You can always trim the edges at the end. So you want it thin enough, but not too thin, because at the end of the day, the thickness of the dough is going to be then the thickness of the rolls, the little swirls in your cinnamon rolls. So I suppose it's kind of preference. If you're going to be doing smaller cinnamon rolls, you can do a you can roll it out thinner. But for bigger, kind of more normal sized ones, you want it slightly on the thicker side.
You're shaping it there.
Okay, so what we're doing here is just trimming it, trimming the edges. You can save that dough and then you can make another batch if you want.
I assume you can freeze or not freeze.
Yeah,
but
you
like,
can freeze the dough,
yeah.
just like any other dough, like it'll last however many months in the freezer. But obviously I like to use it straight away.
So that's the mixture with.
So this is the mixture when it's all done up. You want it nice and nice and creamy like that, so it'll spread nice and easy.
Butter, sugar, and the essence. Yeah.
So I'm just going to spread this on now. Again, it's not exact science to this stuff. But yeah, I find doubling the mixture, this isn't the biggest amount of dough, so we probably didn't need double the mixture, but I find double the mixture is better for the amount of cinnamon rolls that this recipe is going to make. Because, like anything sweet, it's better to have more than less. So again, there's no art to this, just cover the whole surface.
All the way to the edges.
Yeah, evenly, so you basically have filling all the way through. You don't want any parts of the cinnamon roll where there's no filling and it's just plain dough. So everything's spread out now and we're ready to roll up the cinnamon roll. So normally if I was doing this mixture I'd roll it this way and then that would give me more smaller cinnamon rolls. But as I want, I suppose, a few larger cinnamon rolls, I'm going to roll it, I suppose, lengthways. And obviously that's going to give you more roll. So it's obviously going to make the cinnamon roll thicker. So again, there's no science to this. But this is where you obviously wanted to flour your board beforehand so that when you're rolling it none of the dough sticks. So basically want to roll this as evenly as possible. It doesn't matter if some of the filling tends to kind of Sometimes I find it kind of tends to sit towards the middle, but when I've rolled it, I'll just show you how you can kind of squeeze it down and kind of spread it throughout the whole roll. So that's what it looks like there. So if you had any parts where there's going to be more filling, you can kind of just squeeze it and kind of disperse it a bit more. And like, look, this is a pastry treat, so it's not going to have to be precision. It's still going to taste good. Slice it up into portions, little cinnamon rolls. We're going to lay those flat in the dish here, and we've just lined this dish with some butter and then just put some baking parchment in there as well. The butter just helps it stick so it doesn't kind of slip around when it's in the oven. Alright, so we're going to cook these up and then we'll be back in a second. Got all our little cinnamon rolls cut up. That's what they look like. And we're just going to place them into our dish like that. And you want to leave a small gap in between the cinnamon rolls in the pan, because what we're going to do is leave them for maybe 10 or so minutes to expand again, to rise a bit more before we put them into the oven. Okay, so we have our cinnamon rolls in the dish and we're ready to go. So we have just done, I suppose, an egg wash. I just like to leave the egg yolk itself in there. So this is basically what's going to help them brown in the oven. So also we've now turned down the oven to 190 degrees Celsius. That is important before you put the cinnamon rolls in, because otherwise they'll be burnt.
What was it preheated to?
It was are you recording?
Yeah.
It was preheated to 220 degrees Celsius.
Oh, okay.
So again, we do not have a fancy baking brush.
Oh, it's fine though.
But that doesn't matter.
It still tastes good.
Again, like this is baking. It's not. It's something you're just going to kind of get better at and use the little nuances the more you do it. Like, so you're going to see what kind of works best for you. Now, so the recipe says to leave those for about 15 to 20 minutes, but I like to kind of keep an eye on them. I'd rather them slightly undercooked, and then you can switch off the oven and leave them to cook for an extra few minutes in there. But I'd rather cook it less and have a bit more control, because if you leave them in there for a little bit too long, they can turn out dry then when you take them out. Okay, so while we're waiting for the cinnamon rolls to finish up, we're going to get started with the icing. So I don't like to measure this. This is just, I suppose, you eyeball it. So just put in a small amount, maybe start with a half a cup of icing sugar, and then we're going to slowly add milk until we get the consistency we like. So we're going to get started, and always add less milk, because you can't take it back out, basically. So just a little whisk, and we're just going to mix it up, and we can keep adding icing sugar as we go, because we don't want it too runny. You're always going to need probably more icing sugar than you think in relation to the amount of liquid you're using. You can also use water. Will work just as well with this. So it's starting to come together now into more of like a little paste, you can see there. So we want it kind of runny enough, so a nice consistency, so that we can kind of sprinkle it over the top, but not too runny that it's just going to run off the cinnamon rolls completely. So a bit too runny, so a tiny bit more icing sugar and we should be good to go. And like I said, like there's no strict measurements on this. It's just sort of eyeballing it, and different people will like different sort of textures to the icing that they're going to use. So. Okay, so now we have the cinnamon rolls out of the oven. They don't look pretty, but they're going to taste good. So it's going to kind of depend a lot. Like if you have a lot of cinnamon rolls, it might work better. It'll sort of keep your shape a little nicer. And you can also do these in muffin tins. So if you do them small enough and fit them in the muffin tin, they'll be a smaller and neater than shape. So once these cool, we will put the icing sugar on them, and then we'll show the finished. Okay, so here we go. We have the finished product. Presentation is not the best, but they are going to taste good. Right, so I just want to thank you for joining us again today. So yeah, that was cinnamon rolls and our first Fat Friday. So that's cool to get that started. So we're going to be doing one every Friday, and in the lead up to Christmas we're going to be doing more of our festive sort of treats that we like to have. These cinnamon rolls are definitely one of our favourites. So thank you for watching today, and subscribe and leave any comments of any videos you'd like to see us do, any recipes you'd like me to try. Also over the weekend I will be doing my first vlog, and we're going to be going to London, so that's going to be pretty cool. So that video will be up next week at some point. So yeah, stay tuned for more baking videos, and we're going to start doing a little more sort of daily vlogging as well. Right, thanks for watching. See you again soon. Here we have our attack dogs training for the arrival of the big cheese on the 25th. We're going to get him this year. No presents, no mercy.
Okay.
Oh, you can do this.
You're live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.